Perplexed.
Oh my God. Yes, very punny.
You said
Um,
it, not me.
did I say that?
You did. You
Oh
said
wow.
perplexed.
Well, no pun intended on my part. You're the one that put the pun in there.
Well, that's the episode
Uh,
title now.
Perplexed. Hi, I'm Justin,
And I'm Luke.
and this is Relative Banter Podcasts. We've got thousands of unwanted opinions.
And so little time. If you haven't seen Smallville, stop listening here. This is a rewatch for both of us, so we will be talking about future plot points, and you will be spoiled.
Unless you like being spoiled, then go ahead and listen. We are going to be talking about the pilot episode of Smallville, which was directed by David Nutter, written by Alfred Goff and Miles Miller. And a notable guest star in this is Miranda Cosgrove as young Lana Lang. Uncredited, but still definitely noteworthy appearance.
I think it was like a voice thing too. It was just something really random that it is
Yeah,
listed on
because
IMDb.
that definitely wasn't Miranda Cosgrove, like the actress.
Yeah.
Like I think it's just her, which is so weird. Like what was it about Miranda Cosgrove's voice that you wanted that the actual actress wasn't doing?
Who knows, man? The synopsis of the pilot. In 1989, a meteor shower hits Smallville, Kansas, and a child in a spaceship is found by the Kents, who call him Clark. 12 years later, teenage Clark Kent discovers he has strange powers and finds out his alien origins. So, how did you feel about the pilot when you first watched it?
Well, I mean, it was definitely a typical origin story of Superman. It was definitely they'd made it their own. It was kind of everything that you would expect to see in an origin story, but like there was definitely aspects of it that were unique. I did very much enjoy it. It definitely pulled me in. Like, when you had mentioned to me, like about watching this, I was a little apprehensive, just because it had been so long since the show aired. But the pilot was something that, like, when I watched it, I was like, okay, this is something I want to see through.
Have I ever steered you wrong?
Not really. You have some off moments, but not
Hey,
normally.
which one was an off moment?
I'm just messing around. I can't think of any.
Yeah,
Most of the times you are on the ball.
exactly. Yeah, I think for me, having watched this as a kid, I don't remember that much of it. Like I remember pieces, you know, Tom Welling has always been my Superman, but
Mhm.
just rewatching it as an adult, I was also really pulled in by it. I was really impressed by the pilot, and I thought the CGI and then also the explosions during the meteor shower, and like the car crashes and stuff. It felt so high budget for the time.
Yeah, it definitely did. You never know when you're watching older things like that. How it's going to come across. Especially like we're kind of spoiled with the special effects of today's time.
Yeah. Yeah, and this was like before digital and yeah, it just seemed just like a high scale action movie almost. So
Yeah,
I was really impressed that it aged so well. I mean, like Lex has a flip phone and you
yeah,
know, the music of course transports you back in time, but for the most part it feels pretty timeless.
yeah. I mean, for me, like it feels very reminiscent of like being in like high school. Not just because it starts there. It feels like just I think that's just for me because like you said, like the music is like of the time and made me feel like I was in that type of mindset, which is interesting because like I didn't watch this growing up like you did, but like it still captured that like kind of time capsule for me.
Yeah, yeah. It's like very like 2000s teen drama, which is so like it's so WB of that era, and the fact
Yeah.
that they managed to do that in a show with Superman, before he was Superman is like I feel like it just, widens that net of audience. So I always thought back to Smallville with fondness and seeing it through an adult lens. Yeah, I don't know. I was invested from the beginning. So
Yeah, it makes sense. Like I forget who I said it to, but like very early on when I started watching it, I compared it to Gilmore Girls. That's what I was thinking of. It felt like Gilmore Girls with Superman. Like it just like the whole small town teen drama of it all.
I have never watched Gilmore Girls. I have
I
to admit.
That's okay. I didn't watch all of it, but I'm like mostly speaking like just about the not the actual show. Like I'm just saying about like the kind of world that that encompasses. It's very it's it takes place in a small town,
Yeah.
and it just seems like very small scale, but like at the same time you have a very big element of Superman in it. So it's a very interesting dynamic to throw into the mix.
Yeah, it's a mishmash of genres. I think we could just get into it. I think the whole thing with the meteor shower was such a good start because it starts off in space and then you see that there's something looming, but then you're
Mhm.
introduced to, Lex and Lionel. You're introduced to Martha and Jonathan Kent. You're introduced to Lana, who's so cute as a little princess. And I love like kind of foreboding feeling that happens. And then once the meteor shower actually happens, you feel how big it is for this town. Lana watches her parents explode. Like that's some trauma you can't pick apart in therapy.
And yeah,
Uh,
and that's I remember seeing like origin stories of Superman, but not something that delved so much into the meteor shower of it all and like the destruction that that kind of laid to Smallville. It's just it was done in a way that I'd never really seen. Like and just you just it kind of gives you a different perspective just of what that did to the town. Not it wasn't just all about like the Kents finding Clark. It was also about the destruction that this meteor shower brought to the town and like how all the people in that town were affected by it. Like that was a really interesting perspective to add to the this version of the origin story.
yeah, and I think it's safe to say that Smallville Lana Lang is probably the longest running Lana Lang because she's so different in every comic. I've
Yeah,
read some of the comics, like disclosure. Like I've read some of the comics. I haven't read all of them, but she's kind of plays a different part in Clark's life. Like she's always a part of his childhood in Smallville, but she's kind of in different capacities in his life. And I feel
yeah,
like this version, Smallville has a version of her that is very, very grounded and very entwined with Clark's path. She's the Lana Lang for me. So it's like, doing the meteor shower in the way that they did, I think just gives Clark Kent, him even being on Earth affects all of the people in his life in that town so personally that
yeah.
it just does so much. I mean, I'm talking about future episodes too, but it does so much for the story that I think it was a really smart choice.
They were laying their groundwork for sure. They had to have some idea where they were going. Like they may not have planned for 10 seasons. In fact, I actually read that they only planned for five originally.
Mhm.
But yeah, like they were still laying groundwork to to go in the direction that they were intending to go, and that's kind of the beauty of comic book stuff is that there are always so many different versions. So like you can kind of make it your own and maybe take influence from someplace, but that doesn't mean you have to stay true to it.
Yeah, I don't know that Lana was ever explored to the depths that she's explored. I mean, we'll talk about that eventually, but
Yeah.
um even in just this episode, I like how she kind of subverts a lot of, the tropes of that time where it's like, she is a cheerleader, but the first time we meet her, she's kind.
Hmm.
And she's not just a cheerleader that's dating the quarterback. She's smart and she also is like pretty emo.
Yeah.
Like just
I
hangs
mean,
out in graveyards talking to her parents.
I mean, how are you not emo when you lose both your parents at such a young age?
Yeah, it's true. If you think about it, Clark is the reason, or part of the reason, why Lex is bald.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, so Clark obviously grows up kind of normal, kind of like a normal teen, but
Yeah,
obvious,
as normal as you can
yes,
in those
with
circumstances.
yeah, with super speed and super strength. His relationship with Jonathan is kind of something that stuck out to me in this episode, just like how protective Jonathan is of him
Yeah.
when with the Lex crash and also just him even wanting to be on the football team. He's very scared for Clark.
Yeah, he's very, I mean, in typical fashion of Jonathan Kent, like he's very overprotective. And for someone that has superpowers, he's acts like if, he's anything can hurt him, even though he's this superpowered being. And I get it, like fathers are protective, but it's just, it's an interesting dichotomy to see, to have someone be so protective over someone who is so strong. And I get, like the push pull relationship that they have because that's kind of how Clark sees it. He's like, like I have all these superpowers, I have all, like I have impervious skin and, super strength and dad, like I can handle myself. And then I guess that's kind of what leads to them finally telling him about his origins. But it's so interesting to think about like how he rationalized those things in his mind before he knew that he came from another planet and that's why he is the way he is. What did he think was the reason that he was like this when no one else is, and he definitely listened to his parents about hiding it, but what he must have thought about why he has to hide it if he doesn't know the full story.
I mean, maybe he thought he was meteor infected. It's crazy how he shows him the spaceship. He's like, it's time, son, that we
Yeah.
tell you, that we tell the truth. And it's like, I want to know what Clark thought he was going to say, because I'm sure the
Yeah.
spaceship is not it.
Well, yeah, I mean his reaction was like, yeah, like what do you say I'm an alien? Like I also can't believe that like, this is like a 16-year-old kid and like 16,
And
14,
he's supposed to be 14. That is
which is crazy because
the
he looks
most.
like yeah. But yeah, like 14 years old. Like how did you make it? Well, probably not 14 years because they found him. He was like, I don't know how old he's supposed to be, but like he's definitely not a baby. But whatever. Say like, 10, 12 years. And he never went in this cellar and saw this spaceship and like it's just there's a little bit of a plot hole I think there. I wouldn't say maybe not a plot hole, but like it's a little unbelievable that he never stumbled upon this earlier. It is what it is, but it's just crazy. Like I said, like to think about how he rationalized that in his head, and still, when his father's telling him about it, like he's so flabbergasted by what he's being told.
You know what I found weird about that, about Jonathan telling him, is that Martha wasn't there. She wasn't
Yeah,
in that scene.
yeah. I mean, I kind of took that almost as if to mean that like he was the one kind of responsible for waiting this long because even when Jonathan and Martha talk, it seems like Martha was like, we should have told him this sooner.
That's true.
So maybe she kind of, that was just like, like, hey, you have to handle this because you wanted to wait this long.
Yeah, Jonathan, this is on you, buddy.
Yeah. It's kind of like it's like the sex talk, yeah, the dad handles it.
Oh God.
I think just going back a little bit, like I think the first scene at the school, like where you're introduced to Chloe and Pete, I guess it's on the school bus. It's very just nostalgic for me to see like the friend group being introduced like that, and just seeing, how they have this camaraderie about, how they're always poking fun at Clark. It was very well done. Like you like right off the bat, they like established like a good relationship between those three. And like you said, like Clark tries to interact with Lana, and she's kind. She's kind to him, and I think it's a little unexpected. Because not that Lana's ever been unkind, but just I kind of just assumed that, like with the typical type of dynamic of a high school, that, like there's always like the girl that the guy likes, then she doesn't give him the time of day. But this isn't like that. This is more like, like you said, she's being very kind to him, and unfortunately he's falling all over himself because, one, he has a crush on her, and two, she's wearing kryptonite around her neck. But or meteor rock, I should say, because I don't think they barely ever call it kryptonite in this show.
They name it later, but I
Yeah,
think the first few seasons they don't. They just call it Meteor Rock because he doesn't know yet that he's from
yeah. I
Krypton.
mean, exactly. For a few seasons, he doesn't even know what he is. He just knows that he's like this.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on the Lana thing. I like that it subverts tropes, and I like that even though you've just met these characters, when you get to the graveyard scene, you're rooting for them to become closer because they bond over this sort of grief. And I don't think that, and this is what I mean when I say Lana's a deep character, is that she has this persona at school for sure. She's dating the football player, she's a cheerleader. I'm sure she gets straight A's because she seems very smart. But she also has this darkness in her because she lost her parents so young, and that really affects someone like that. And they bond over this grief, her about her parents and Clark over this life he thought he knew, but
Yeah.
turns out he's from a different planet. So it's like
Hmm.
he's grieving that while she's still grieving her parents and feels very alone.
Yeah. He doesn't even know what he's grieving.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't know where he's from or who sent him there. Or, he doesn't know that his planet at this point is destroyed. All he knows is that he was sent here on a pod. Like, so, like, he's grieving something he doesn't even know that he lost. And it's definitely different than what Lana's going through, but they're both dealing with something where they feel very alone. And I think that's one of the things that the show did very right. Just right off the bat, they established really good relationships between like these main characters. Not just Lana and Clark, but like I said, Chloe and Pete, the friendship that he has with them, his parents and the friendship and the relationship he has with them. They're very just strong relationships that are built right off the bat. And I think that's one of the things that draws you in, is that you're invested because you see how well they interact with each other. I think it's very rare to see that done so well right off the bat.
Yeah, like even before the meteor shower happens, you learn so much about Jonathan and Martha. You learn so much about Lex's relationship with Lionel, and you learn a lot about even Aunt Nell, who very clearly
Yeah.
has a crush on Jonathan Kent, which I don't know why. I don't really think that went anywhere, but it was very interesting to see that.
I think it's just to show that they had like a past,
Yeah,
um,
history.
like a history. So it makes sense why the families would kind of know each other. Aside from the fact that they're neighbors. It kind of just speaks to that, I think. We talked a lot about the scenes that have kind of happened, the school bus and the school and stuff. One thing we didn't really touch on is that's her boyfriend. I can't think of his name right
Whitney.
now. Whitney. Yeah, we didn't really talk about Whitney.
I mean, what's there to say?
Well, just about like like how he strings them up like a fucking scarecrow.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I think we should probably talk about the story of the week and kind of how it parallels that because I think they planted that story in order to pay that off with Clark. Because like even in the scene where the guy's name is Jason, he even says that he has a destiny. Obviously we know the Superman story. So it's like he has a destiny and also, he's strung up like a scarecrow too. And, it's just
Just
very like,
the foreshadowing of the S on his chest too.
yeah, pretty on the nose there, I would say.
Hmm. Yeah, I we didn't really talk about too how about how that like kind of like ties in with Lex's story.
Mhm.
Because like during the meteor shower, we see Lex and Lionel on the helicopter, and then later, like you're just how Lex kind of just stumbles upon this guy in the middle of the field, and I remember thinking like I thought it was like like a premonition because you see like a guy with an S on his chest, you would think is Superman. So like for me, it was like, is this a premonition of like him seeing what's to come of with Superman coming to Earth in this meteor shower? Like, is that what's happening? And it didn't end up being that, obviously, but like I remember thinking, like, what does this mean? Like in the grand scheme of things. And then, like you said, that like it kind of means that Clark is responsible for Lex being bald because of what happens to him in the meteor shower, and how that kind of changes the trajectory of his life. And then like have that come back even like after they flash forward to the present day. It's very interesting to just see how that all kind of ties into each other.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Lex as a child doesn't help that guy because obviously the meteor shower is happening and he was running for his life. But then Lex, I think Lex does have another sort of premonition that Clark is going to be there because he wasn't, I mean, maybe they cut a scene, but like he
Yeah.
was just happened to be in the field when Clark needed him, you know?
I think that just goes to him like stalking Clark, for lack of a better word, because he was very interested since that car crash.
Yeah.
Like, who is this guy? Like, how did this happen? Type of deal. He's perplexed, like from the beginning. When it happens, he's like, he just seems like there has to be something else going on here because like this guy just can't just survive like me hitting him with a car off this bridge.
Perplexed.
Oh my god, yes, very punny.
You
Um,
said it, not me.
did I say that?
You did. You
Oh
said
wow.
perplexed.
Well, I no pun intended on my part. You're the one that put the pun in there.
Well, that's the episode title
Uh,
now.
Perplexed. I also remember talking about how like that was very Final Fantasy. Just the scene of like how the car crash goes down, the equipment falling off.
No, I've
Not
never
not
I've
of
never.
Final Fantasy. I did the same thing again. Final Destination. Final Destination. This is what I'm.
Oh, I
I
was like,
made this.
what the? I didn't watch that.
You don't watch Final Destination?
No, I never like played Final Fantasy. That's what I
Oh
mean.
yeah. Well,
I've
that's
I've
what I.
seen Final Destination.
But yeah, like I just remember the whole crash sequence reminding me of Final Destination, this freak accident that happens, and it leads to him, Lex, hitting Clark with his car off a bridge. It's a very wild and random thing to have happened.
Well, that just goes to show that Final Destination characters should have just hit up Superman and they would have been fine. You know what I mean?
maybe, maybe, but yeah, like I also think that it's kind of like you mentioned, like that Lex doesn't really help
Or
Jason.
Jeremy. His
That
name is Jeremy, not Jason.
Jeremy. Okay, in that flashback, at this time he helps Clark, and that's almost kind of like a redemption, that he was able to help Clark where he didn't help Jeremy.
Yeah, and then he was like, it's kind of like paying it forward as well because he saved him, and then now he saves Clark. Although like Clark wasn't dying per se, but who
Yeah,
knows?
it's a very interesting just like rendition of Lex for me, because like it's just another thing that you don't really get to see much of. You see the upbringing of Lex from Lionel. That's kind of like where this darkness came from. But like you also see like in these earlier scenes, at the beginning, that Lex is still like a young adult trying to find himself, and he's not all bad. He does have some good in him that he's, I think, kind of struggling to keep. And it's just very interesting to see that downfall, because you almost want to believe that Lex is capable of better. And that is not something I remember thinking about Lex Luthor in previous renditions, because like it's just you already see him as an evil guy.
Yeah, he's much more morally gray. I mean, especially in this episode, you see him as a child, an innocent child, and then you see him trying to do the right thing. And
Yeah.
although there's a lot of like sort of stalking in this episode, which I think is very like reminiscent of the early 2000s. I mean, you have Clark in the telescope too, watching Lana.
Well, like, just like I said, like the same thing with Lex, kind of like following Clark because he's intrigued by him, but it is kind of weird that he's just following this guy around.
Especially that he's an adult and Clark is a teen. It's kind of weird. But
Yeah,
I also, but it's his curiosity is piqued. But then obviously we know what happens and that it becomes an obsession.
which in the grand scheme of things is very interesting because he has the same obsession as his father. It
Right.
just came from his own place. It's ironic to see that they both end up having the same obsession that but they both took a different path to get there.
Yeah. I think it's interesting though too how the show posits this because if you think about it, Lex was texting and driving, right? Which on a flip phone, nonetheless, that's crazy.
That
You
is pretty
having to press the same button like 5 times to get to the right letter. They're kind of saying if you text and drive and go off of a railing into a river, Superman might save your life,
and you might be obsessed with him because of
and
it.
you might be obsessed with him. I mean, it's interesting messaging. Also, the mouth to mouth. I don't know. Don't don't knock the shippers or anything like that. I don't personally ship it, but I see where you're coming from. I see where you're coming from.
It's definitely understandable, yeah. But
It's
again,
there.
it also goes to, seeing Lex as someone that would even be worthy of that. Clark's just too good of a person to be with someone like Lex.
I don't know, but I mean, with the obvious, the age difference, were the age
Yeah,
difference not a factor? I think this iteration of Lex, without all the lies, I feel like he's not a bad guy here. I don't think he's bad. I think he's definitely rich and privileged, and I'm sure there's some bad in him, but it's like I think at this point he was in a position where he could have been redeemed. And I think he stays in that place for most of season 1 and 2.
it just always feels like, he's one push away from going over the edge.
Hmm.
Lex is very emotionally driven, and it just always seems like he's being tipped in one direction or the other. Like he always has this devil and the angel on his shoulder, and he's never sure of which one to listen to. So I don't know. I just can't picture. I can see like a friendship. I can see the friendship that they have because there are things that explain the way. But like someone on like a deeper level when like if a relationship were to occur, and I just can't imagine that even with the better version of Lex that we have at this time that Clark could ever go for it if
Oh
if
no.
that were the case.
Yeah. I think ultimately their morals would end any sort of relationship. It would just be like, enemies, friends to
Frenemies.
lovers to enemies or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, Clark is to sometimes his own fault is good and will always do the right thing and will always see the good in people.
Yeah, well, I mean, like in comparison, I look at the role model that Clark had in his parents versus the role model that Lex had.
And that's exactly why they do that, I think. And that's why
Yeah.
it's such smart writing that
Hmm.
they introduce you to Lionel Luthor and how he treats Lex versus the entire episode of Jonathan and Clark's relationship. And you continue to see that throughout the show,
Yeah.
which, yeah, it's just very smart. And I think like seeing Lex's origin and seeing what he's had to contend with in his life does make him a sympathetic character, despite all the that he does.
100%. Yeah, I agree.
So, and yeah, I mean, Michael Rosenbaum is a fantastic Lex.
Yes. I do also remember that I had a hard time, like, not that he was doing anything wrong. I just, I very much remember Michael Rosenbaum from Sorority Boys or Sorority Girls. What the hell's the name of that?
Sorority Boys, because sorority
Yeah,
is
sorority.
the girls one.
But yeah, I remember that movie and like his character, like that's probably what I know him best from. So like he's a very animated character in that movie. And so for a while I had to kind of like get that picture out of my head to kind of take him more seriously. But yeah, like I definitely think that he does a very good job of the character. It's just, kind of that thing like where you have an idea of something of someone in your head, and like you have to like remove that to kind of appreciate what they're doing.
Definitely for me, it was kind of the reverse where I saw Sorority Boys and I was like, why is Lex Luthor in drag right now?
Yeah,
So it was the opposite for me. But no,
yeah.
he's got range, that guy.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like it was a good cast, and they played their characters well, and like you definitely want to see how these relationships grow and change. Like even with Whitney, like right off the bat, like you see like this rivalry that there is between Whitney and Clark, because I mean he rightfully thinks that Clark has a thing for Lana. And there's just
Yeah.
this rivalry, like right off the bat, that like you see how much they don't like each other, and what lengths Whitney will go to like try and get Clark away from Lana, like literally like ties him up on a freaking as a scarecrow, just because he talked to his girlfriend.
Well, I think Whitney was absolutely insecure in that moment too,
Oh,
because of the
100%. Yeah.
that was,
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
she kissed him on the cheek and, they not to say that Lana did anything wrong, but I
Mm.
feel like Whitney, even though he was only in a couple of scenes before that moment, he seems pretty insecure just in general. Like he's afraid to become just another Smallville loser that goes nowhere. And
100%. Yeah,
that's he even says as much.
I definitely agree. It's just, again, sort of going against the norm of, like I said before, like with Lana, you don't necessarily expect her to be kind, because there's always that, like you see like the loser guy kind of fawning over the popular girl, and she's not exactly the nicest. You also expect kind of the boyfriend that to not be the nicest either. And in the beginning, Whitney is not, I wouldn't say nice, but he's not a dick right off the bat. He does like help Clark pick up his books, and to see that shift right off the bat, is crazy to see, like, oh wow, like this guy really is insecure and has like a dark side of his own. Um, and it's just interesting to see, after that introduction, there are definitely a lot of moments in this episode where I think that it wasn't as predictable as you would think like a show like this might be. Like it did a lot of things that you wouldn't expect to have been done. It broke away from those norms.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is I think what makes it a successful show.
Mm-hmm.
It's got the teen drama stuff and they have some of the tropes like they have the cheerleading, they have the football team and all that, but they subvert when it's important. And then they also have, this other like fantasy sci-fi genre happening at the same time, and it just makes it for just interesting television. But I think generally what this pilot does so successfully is it makes every character feel real. It gives you very real relationships that you're already invested in, and you want to see how it develops even further, even though you know where Clark Kent ends up. Let me ask what what your favorite scene was in the pilot, do you think?
I think my favorite scene is the scene in the graveyard. I really enjoy the bonding moment that they share. I also love the kind of playfulness that, despite them both being sad in the moment, like that Clark is able to like lighten the mood by like acting like he's talking to Lana's parents too, and still throwing some sweet things to say about her to make her feel better. I think it's a very tender moment, and I think that it was done very well. Similarly, I also really like the scene where Jonathan is telling Clark about his origins. So one of those two are definitely my favorite. They both stick out to me. There's more than meets the eye, I think, is like kind of what it embodies in both of those scenes.
I also love the graveyard scene for the same reasons you do.
Yeah.
But I think an unexpected scene that I like is the Wall of Weird scene, which we didn't talk about, because
No.
I like that it brings Chloe and Pete into the fold and it brings the sort of engine of the story from here on out into the plot kind of organically. because the wall of weird is what starts the whole freak of the week thing because that's their reference.
Yeah, and
And
also I think it also starts because it happens, after he has his talk with his dad. So like he's kind of coming to the realization that this is kind of all his fault.
yeah, which makes it the fact that the writing is all about the emotional journey, and that's what's driving everything is what makes it so good. Because if you had put that scene in before Clark knew, it wouldn't have had the impact that it had. But
Hmm.
it's such a three-prong scene because you have Clark thinking it's his fault, introducing the wall of weird and where we're going to go from here, and also telling us a lot about Chloe's character.
Yeah, which Chloe definitely serves as like the lowest lane of this part of the show. Like the journalistic angle, a lot of drive to just find out what the hell's going on.
Well, they are cousins after all.
Well, yeah, but we don't know that at the time.
I know.
But yeah, it's very interesting to see either way, because without Lois Lane being a character in the show yet, it's interesting to see that, there is still someone like that in his life.
Yeah.
And that also can, speak to why he also has an interest in journalism.
Yeah. Want to talk about music real quick? I
Sure. Yeah.
think The Calling had a song in this episode, and Lifehouse, that iconic scene at the end where he imagines Lana in the barn.
Hmm. Which definitely makes more sense when you have that deleted scene from the football field earlier in the episode, because it
Yeah.
just proves that he's like a daydreamer. He's always daydreaming of like things that he wished would happen with Lana. Because I remember when it happened, I was kind of like, "Oh, is this actually happening?" Or is that I had an inkling that it was like a like a daydream. You kind of question it, but I think if you had that other scene earlier, then you can be like, "Oh, this is like a recurring thing."
Yeah, they also cut another scene where Clark puts all the football players' cars on top of each other. That
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
that isn't in the version that's on Disney and Hulu right now.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, I like that scene too. I wish they would have been able to keep both of those scenes in, but
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Another really cool scene while we're on that topic of like him showing his powers is like just in general, like at the end, like the kind of the top of the episode, like when the energy is all high.
Climax.
The climax, yes, thank you. Um, the climax of the episode, like when he's trying to stop Jeremy from what his ultimate goal is to like kill all these people at the prom, and it's just great to see like he's struggling still. He doesn't know exactly how to use his powers and everything, but like he's still like his instinct is immediately to just save people, and he does eventually. Like he figures out a way to do that, and that's great to see that from right off the bat. Like he's trying to use his powers for good. It just shows that Clark Kent is Clark Kent from the very beginning. Like he always is looking out for everybody.
Yeah. He goes, "I'm Clark Kent and you're in Smallville."
Yeah,
It's like it's very wholesome.
yeah. But yeah, that song by Lifehouse is like, it brings like such nostalgic feelings back, to that time. It's a very good way to encapsulate that time.
Yeah. Still bangs too. Love that song.
100%.
I think that's it for this episode.
Yeah, but you can follow us on Instagram at Relative Banter Pod and on Twitter at Relative Banter.
If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email us at relativebanterpod@aol.com. Smallville is old, and so is our email address.
And so are we.
Speak for yourself.
Join us next time when we discuss episode number 2, Metamorphosis.
See you then.